Hello, everyone. I am Anne Kampf. Welcome. If you are an engineer, a lawyer, a systems thinker, or simply someone who has ever asked why a capable person collapses under weight they seem built to carry, this conversation is for you. This session is titled Time, the Unengineered Variable. All my sessions are private projects that I do in my own capacity. We spend enormous energy building systems that respect load limits, bridges, software, contracts. But when it comes to people, to the humans running those systems, we tend to hand out responsibility like it's infinite, as if timing doesn't exist, as if capacity doesn't have a ceiling. Today's guest has spent more than 3 decades at an unusual intersection: the precision of astronomical calculation, the structure of ancient Indian logic, and the behavior of real people in real time. Ernst Wilhelm. Ernst has been involved in Vedic astrology since 1995, and before that in Western astrology. He has delved deeply into the ancient astronomical and astrological texts of India, with most of his time spent on Jaimini Sutras and Brihat Parasharata Hora Shastra. He is most thankful for Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra for having giving us the Lajitadi Avatash, his all-time favorite astrological principle. Ernst has also developed Kala Vedic astrology software and a birth card system of astrology called the Cards of Truth. His current development is the resurrection of the ancient circle of Adityas for the purpose of analyzing horoscopes with a greater spiritual and behavioral focus, as well as to increase accuracy of predictions. Through his teaching, writing, and research, Ernst has helped thousands of students worldwide deepen their understanding of how timing shapes the arc of human life. He comes at astrology not through mysticism, but through structure, reproducibility, and pattern recognition. The same criteria any serious engineer would apply. Ernst, welcome.
Hey,
I'm
thank
really
you.
glad that you are here.
I'm very happy to be here, Annie. Thank you.
Well, I'm very curious and very excited about this session with you, Ernst. So let me just shoot the first question. You started with a technical engineering oriented mindset.
Yeah,
What
very so.
what was missing in purely rational models of human behavior? What couldn't they explain that draw you to astrology?
Well, okay, that's a really interesting question because when I started astrology over 30 years ago, 1991, it was a very different world when it comes to what we knew of human behavior, what we knew of psychology. And at the time, there was very limited information to deal with certain human problems compared to what there is now. Since then, we've had the internet. We've made great advances in relationship dynamics and all kinds of psychological dynamics and way to heal the consciousness. So we live in a very different world now than we did 30 some years ago. Um, so, you know, as we all know, we get into situations that we don't understand. Everyone gets into different situations that are very perplexing. For one person, it's money, another person, it's career, another person, it's relationships. We get into this situation where we just get so stuck and nothing seems to make sense.
Mhm.
And we question why that's happening. And so, in a time of like a period of that time, of that type in my life, is when I turned to astrology because it gave me the answers to understand why am I stuck in this particular, with these particular problems? Why does this thing not work? And so I think today's age, we could investigate this online. We can investigate with AI. We can investigate it with all the available counselors that anyone can find, no matter where they live these days. And we can still find it with astrology. We've made advances with that too, of course. But at the time, that was really the only solution I could find. There was nothing else I could find to explain my problems. And then it did it masterfully. And at the time, I was working with natural healing and health. And I instantly gave it up and turned to astrology because I realized it was answering the bigger questions, the bigger problems. And I've never changed my mind about that. And the beauty of astrology really is that even though psychology has evolved really dramatically, so many new techniques of healing our consciousness have been developed, become popular in the last 30 years. The beauty of astrology is it has the psychology of all ages.
Mhm.
It really shows how things are really working. It just in every age we understand the astrology on a deeper level. So the astrology is actually always a step ahead of any other type of psychology out there because we can learn any psychology, the latest advances, and instantly we can look at a horoscope and take that thought to the next level. Because it's a perfect model. When psychologists are dealing with people, they're dealing with, we can say fractured models. They're looking at it through their own fractured psyches to some degree. And we're never seeing a perfect model because every person is damaged. See, with astrology, why every chart we look at is damaged. I mean, there's impossible to have a horoscope where everything is perfect, okay? As a result, every person is born with some issues to work out. But with the astrological principles, we can understand in theory what it is to operate at a really truly healthy level. We're never going to find that in an individual, but because we have a model of it, we could understand what we're working towards. Psychology doesn't give that model to the purity that astrology does. And so there's a philosophy, a perfect philosophy, a perfect psychology that's found in the symbols of astrology, even though it'll never be found in any single horoscope. And that's really the beauty of it is that it's like a book that we can read over and over again. And every time we have a greater knowledge, we are able to go deeper into that book.
Yeah. I also well, because I've studied physics, I was one of the skeptics. So I studied after graduation of the university. I also delved into astrology, more into the Western and into the Chinese astrology. And after reading a lot, taking a lot of classes, for me was very clear that the birth chart of one person is kind of his or her identity card. And I see astrology more from a functional point of view. Like, as you said, for me, or all the signs are archetypes that are symbolizing or more related to of one person, and the planets are of one person. Um, so I fully agree with what you say. Each of us comes with certain issues that he or she has to solve during his or her life, or with let's say areas towards we have to give more attention in order to have a more easier and fulfilled life. And those are, from my perspective, are some patterns that we have to be aware of, take care of. um, what made astrology pass your internal engineering smell test? What criteria did it have to meet before you took it seriously?
I mean, really, it just had to work, is what it comes down to. It just like if I'm going to buy a car, I want to turn the key in the car, turn it, and I want the engine to start. And I want to drive down the road. And it was very much the same thing. It just simply it worked. It turned a nightmare into 2 years of studies, or no, sorry, 2 weeks of studying some astrology, and the nightmare turned into a very peaceful, acceptable situation. It just explained it. And for me, if I had the understanding of something, it was really easy just to live with it and move on. But if my mind didn't grasp it, because I was, engineering type, our minds want to know the facts, right? As soon as my mind could grasp it, I was able to make peace with it. And that's really where astrology really is suited for engineer type minds, for physicists, scientific minds who have a mental strength that when they understand something, they can be okay with it because essentially they want to be aligned with the truth of things, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and those, people like me, people with that mindset really benefit so much from astrology because it just gives us so many answers that our mind can, work with and accept. Um, which is one of the ways we heal and get through life. It's just with understanding.
Mm.
So
Was
it's just,
there,
essentially it gives the understanding needed to resolve the problem peacefully, to be at peace with life.
yeah, was there a specific moment where timing patterns became undeniable to you, not as a belief, but as observable, repeatable data that gave you this certainty that you needed, this answer
Oh,
that you needed?
yeah, I mean, it was from the beginning. That was a big part of it. I just looked at the transits that had been going on in the previous year of my life, and it just lined up. And it lined up. And the last of these transits that was triggering me was actually the transit that, on that day, I decided I was going to be an astrologer. And so it was just really the sequence of events, of difficult events brought about by a particular transit that was setting me up to, on that last day, just say, hell, I'm going to be an astrologer. And that's exactly what happened. Um, and so, yeah, from the very beginning, the timing was aligned. And of course, since then, that was just very basic timings, transits of major planets like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And of
Mm,
course, since then, I've learned so many different timing methods. And the more timing methods we learn, the more we're able to see the timing of things, and the more we see, the more we see more of our events being timed. Because when we have more techniques, we're able to, find more things that are timed. And when it really just comes down to it, that, you realize that it's so much of life is timed. We could say all of it is timed. Maybe we don't know all the techniques to see it all, but it really is a perfectly ordered machine. And I really see that like that. People want to say, oh, you can do anything you want. But the thing is, everything we do affects and impacts other people, right? So if you have a clock with a bunch of gears, not a single gear in there can do anything it wants. Each gear can only move in accordance with the watch spring that is moving those gears in the watch. If one gear all of a sudden decides to do whatever it wants, the whole watch is going to explode and springs and gears are going to shoot all over. And I really feel we're like that too, that, we're supposed to be at a certain place at a certain time to share experience with a certain person. And that may be a beautiful, maybe a horrible experience. It might be the experience of driving down the road and having a truck smash into you,
mm,
or it might be the experience of falling in love, or making a great business connection, or whatever, finding a friend. And so if there's someone else who's destined to have an experience with with us, then of course we have to be in that time, place, and position to share that experience. And if we're not there, the whole machine starts falling apart. So I've really learned to see astrology as these, as everything is moving through astrology, all timing systems move in a circular fashion, actually. That all these gears are revolving, all these astrological gears are revolving and lining up events. And it's really amazing when you can see it, especially when you get multiple person events going on. I've even seen cases where somebody's doing something that impacts another person and it's shown in their chart and they don't even know it's happening because it's a series of events. And maybe the beginning of the series, other people don't even know it's happening. And then, but you can see it in their chart, something's happening here. And then 6 months later, as that series of events continues, they find out, oh, that you were doing this 6 months ago. And yet that was in the chart that was happening. So the gears are always moving. Yeah.
yeah. Does this happen, what you just mentioned? Can you see in the charts, in the birth charts of the family members? Does this happen mainly within a family? Or you can see this also when, for example, two business partners are coming together
You,
to
you,
create a business?
you can see both, you can see both of it. Let's say you get two business partners coming together for the first time, and one of them's married and one of them's not, and they're opposite gender, and they meet to come for business, and all of a sudden they're connecting and they're getting flirty and they're feeling something. We can go to the spouse's chart that day, who has no idea that he's even at a business meeting, and it'll show in her chart that
Mm.
the husband is getting turned on by another woman. That's what I'm talking about. It happens with anyone who's part of the equation. So we have this thing called mutual destinies, where people are bouncing against each other, bouncing into each other, bouncing off each other in a very synchronized way, actually. And this draw, like I said, sometimes a person will know. Eventually, the wife is going to know something was going on, but and the horoscope knows that the event's already happening, but she just consciously doesn't know yet.
Yeah. But when you say horoscope, you don't mean the horoscope that we read in the magazines or hear at the
No,
TV
no,
stations, because it's very general, and I don't think that's the real horoscope.
no, that's just the position of the sun sign, and you can tell some fun characteristics from that. But I'm talking about the real horoscope, where we calculate all the planets in the sky. We also calculate other sensitive points, and then we do calculations of those calculations to get very minute changes. So even people who are born 1 minute apart actually have quite different charts when we look into the full detail of the chart. And and so if you just look at the calculations of the planets in the sky from minute to minute, they're basically the same. The moon will maybe move a slight degree. The other planets will hardly move in a minute. But there's other calculations you do where even the slightest motions make big impacts in a person's life, who they are, their destiny, and how they deal with life, which is really the most important factor.
Mm. How, for example, for me, when I think at fate and destiny, for me, fate is something that one cannot change. For example, the day that I am born
Hmm.
in, or the day that I will die, or the family I'm born in, or the city I'm born in. This is fate. Fate. Those are things that I cannot change. But
Hmm.
destiny for me is, or are the multiple ways or roads within my life that I can take
Hmm.
to go from A to B. And in the end, the outcome will depend on my decision at a certain point in time.
Hmm.
How do you see this difference between fate and destiny?
Okay, so yes, what we do at any moment is based on the decision at the time, right? But the thing is, what is the decision based on? Right? The thing is, the decision is not based on the decision. The decision is not based on what we think it is, which means the decision is not based on a rational examination of the choices. The decision is based on, if I want to say it most clearly, the decision is based on our beliefs and habits.
Mm,
That's really, if I have to say, what's the decision based on? It's our beliefs and our habits. What is freedom? Freedom is the ability to act on our beliefs, right?
yeah,
Right? I believe
great.
I should be an engineer. I want to be an engineer. I believe I should be an artist. I can be an artist. I believe in Allah. I should be able to be a Muslim, and so on, right?
Mm,
That's what basic freedom is to pursue our beliefs. And we do that. We're constantly in the state of pursuing our beliefs. The problem is, our beliefs are not such an intellectual thing as we would like them to be. Our our beliefs are rooted deeply in our unconsciousness, which means our consciousness has beliefs about how life works, and nothing our conscious mind thinks will override those beliefs. The only thing that will override those beliefs is to follow those beliefs, make decisions out of those beliefs, and get into serious trouble and get smashed by the consequences. And then we start realizing that um, there's a lot more to us than just this idea that we know what we're doing and we're going to make this decision for what we want. So one of the things we can see with astrology is if a person has working and unworking beliefs, meaning beliefs that will cause decisions that result in a satisfying life, or beliefs that essentially simply don't work. It's like in science, people have a theory, they test it and they see if it works, right? If it doesn't work, they throw it out. The problem with humans is when they have a belief, they try it. When it doesn't work, they try it again. And when it doesn't work, they try it again. And that's the definition of insanity, right? To try something over and over again, expect different results. Scientists don't do that. They maybe will do a test another time, isolate a few more variables. So it's not really the same test, right?
Mm.
Slightly different. Yet humans will engage in a relationship the very same way. It'll fail. They'll engage under the same belief system. This is how love works. It'll fail. They'll get up, try to make love work with the same idea of how love works, and it'll fail. They simply have a belief in how love works that is false. And so every time they try it, it fails. But instead of examining why is it failing, maybe my theory is completely wrong, they go do it again and they get hurt again until the pain is so great they get therapy and they find out they're playing the game the whole wrong way. That's what we're doing. So it's not our decisions that decide our destiny. It's more our fate.
Mm.
Our belief
Our
system.
belief system, yeah.
The problem with our belief system is our belief system is largely anchored in the unconsciousness. The unconscious has a lot more power to make our decisions than the most intellectual scientist will ever realize, unless he examines himself, you know? And so we run into these problems. Jung said that what remains in the unconsciousness manifests as fate. So if we're not conscious of our belief systems, how we're operating, what our unconsciousness is driven to do, how it thinks the world works, if we don't become clear of those drives, it's going to just make all the decisions for us. And essentially, then there is no free will. There's only fate, which means our unconscious is driving us forwards.
Mm.
And, really essentially the only thing we can change is ourselves. That's where we have a free reign of space. We really don't have a lot of free reign of space in other realms, but we can change ourselves. See, that actually changes everything now. Let's say, for instance, we're born on this planet Earth. All right, the mere fact that we're born on this planet Earth limits what we can do.
Correct.
Right? We don't have free will. I don't have the free will to build a transportation machine and show up at your desk and have this conversation live. I can't do that, right? All right. So I'm on Zoom with you. But, 20 years ago, I couldn't even have been on Zoom with you, right? But see, there's perhaps a culture somewhere on some planet somewhere where I could just jump in a teleportation device and we could be having some tea and having this conversation live, right? So no matter how much I want that in this world, in this day, in this age, it's not an option. So the space we're born into immediately limits our options.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, different people are born in different social situations, different countries. All right. A person born in, pre-1991 Soviet USSR could not just go anywhere they wanted, right? They could not
Correct.
just go to any country anytime they wanted. So there's limitations based on the space that we're born into. It creates serious limitations. The limitations upon a person born in an impoverished area of Africa is very, very different than the limitations born in an impoverished area of New York City. All
Mm-hmm.
right. Many, many, many famous people have come out of impoverished areas of New York City, right? Not a lot of people have come out of impoverished Africa. So, we can't change that. We can't just go to another planet, snap our fingers, show up in another country, and so on. If a person's short and they want to do something that requires height, they can't snap their fingers and become tall. So right away, our free will is limited by this space. And so each of us in our lives has a space, a being that we're born into. That includes, what we do well, what we struggle with, where we're born, our physical attributes, our intellectual attributes. These all become a limitation of space. And it's within that space that we have to explore our possibilities. All right.
Yeah.
And the next step is exploring those possibilities within that space. And this is where the human factor really comes into play, because how a person's relationship to themselves ultimately determines how they're going to explore that space.
Correct.
Okay. So if a person is born in a space that doesn't offer offer a lot of opportunities, but they believe that they're capable, they believe they're intelligent, they believe that they're strong, and they believe that hard work is a worthwhile venture, then they can be born in the worst place and become millionaires. But if a person believes that this is how life is, I don't deserve any better. I'm just going to sit here and live in this box on the side of the road, which literally happens in many, many
Mm.
countries, then that's what's going to happen. So it's changing their relationship to, it's changing our relationship to ourselves that lets us maximize the benefits we can receive from the space we're born into. And that space includes, again, the surroundings, the area, the country, the planet, but also our intellectual abilities, our physical abilities, that, how we work with that. So you'll see people who are not attractive becoming successful actors and actresses. You'll see people who have stuttering problems who become successful actors and speak beautifully. And then you'll see the same kinds of people that do nothing.
Yeah.
And the reason the difference is the person's relationship. They're born into the same space. They could be twins, you know. The relationship a person has with themselves determines how we take advantage of the space we're born into. That is
Mm.
changeable. And part of this relationship we have with ourselves is based on our belief system. The core of our belief system is what we believe about ourselves. So if a person believes they're unlovable, they're going to approach relationships in a desperate way that's going to be guaranteed to ruin any hope of a healthy relationship, right? So
Yeah.
it's always the core belief system is always a belief system about ourself that is skewed. And this is held in the unconsciousness in our body of emotional memories of experiencing ourselves as children. And it is not something the intellect even has a grip on until a person has suffered a lot, you know?
Mm.
So where we have freedom, where we can truly make decisions, is when we start making the decision to improve the relationship we have with ourselves. And that means overhauling the belief systems we have about ourselves. Now we can take advantage of that space. Okay. Which means if you're in the Soviet Union as 1980, you're going to be in the Soviet Union unless you want to risk your life to get out. But but the events of your life are going to be the same, but how much are you going to take advantage of that? The classic example is we look at a chart and we say, oh, well, someone comes in, I want a relationship. And we look at the chart and we say, well, nothing this year, but August, you know, we see something happening for you. You'll meet someone in August. All right. So now the circumstantial space has set up August, you're going to meet someone. Now, how much can a person take advantage of that? Are they going to meet that person, have a great relationship? Or are they going to meet that person and screw it up, right? That's up to their relationship with themselves. That's up to the belief system they carry into the relationship.
Yeah. And
Again, how capable are we to take advantage of what's in our space, whether it's a space of meeting someone, getting a new job, whatever. And by you know changing and making the decision to change our relationship with ourselves, we take full advantage of that, and that's how we change our destiny.
mm. And I think it's maybe this is my my belief, or this is what I'm thinking, Ernst. It's not only limited to our beliefs or changing the relationship with ourself. I think if I'm thinking at the four elements, it's like you can see in one's chart that the conditions for having a relationship will be in August next year. But if this person is just staying at home and being grumpy and doing nothing, nothing will happen, because the person that they are meant to meet will not come and ring the bell in front of their door. Yeah. I think it's like I'm returning to the four elements. I think, fire for me is that desire that one has, yeah, to do something, to change something, to create something. Then I move to water, which is the emotion. I'm feeling, um I'm starting to feel how it will be if my desire will come true. And
Mhm.
then I'm going to air, which is mind, and I'm thinking of plans, of feasibility studies, of how can I do, how can I create something out of my desire. And then if I move to earth, yeah, I'm really hands on. I'm moving my ass towards my goal and doing something. because
Yeah.
even if the conditions are there and if the space is there, and if I, to try to change my belief, if I'm not doing nothing and I'm just saying, from today I will be fabulous from today on, and I'm not doing nothing to move towards this fabulousness, it will not happen.
Yes. And the reason that is because again, the person's relationship with themselves is what's keeping them at home being grumpy. And so even if the girl or the guy showed up and knocked on their door, it wouldn't matter. Because again, they're not taking advantage of that space.
Mm.
Okay, which means
Yeah.
the circumstances, the possibilities. The space is gives us our possibilities. So I would say the most difficult thing about a horoscope and doing a reading, and especially in the context of predictions, is that there's things getting triggered, timing events happening all the time. And sometimes a person simply like there's triggers all the time for relationships. There's triggers happening. There's always something at some point that's going to line a person towards a relationship opportunity. Yet there's some people who've never had a girlfriend or boyfriend and never been married. How is that possible? That's because their chart inherently is saying, I'm simply not involving myself in this area of life.
Mm.
And that's a very difficult thing to do. So we always have to look at the chart. So we look at the chart and we see this guy stays at home, he's grumpy, he's not involved socially. So right away, if we see that, and if that's 100%, if we see timing methods that show that he's going to have an opportunity, we ignore them. We're not going to predict it because this whole chart says no to that, you know? And that's the hardest thing to do, and to do with astrology is to be able to find and go, well, this is actually never going to happen for this person. And so even when the timing brings opportunities, it's really no opportunity because they themselves are not going to move towards that opportunity.
Okay.
And very much like you said, it works in the context of the elements. The timing works in a little different in the context of the elements, and it actually uses 5 elements, because we also have the 5 elements. You're talking about the 4 element way that it works. So again, it comes down to that person limiting that world. What's in him? It's
Mm.
it's a relationship thing with him. It's a belief system about himself that's causing him to live a life that's not normal.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not a choice. Maybe that's not his goal, and that could be too. But why is that not his goal? Because he has a belief system that there's something better to do. Maybe he wants to meditate all day and be enlightened, right? Again, he's taking the freedom to pursue his belief system, hopefully consciously. And what we all need to really arrive at to have any free will is we have to arrive at a place where we have introspected, understood what's going on in our unconsciousness, brought to light what's in our unconsciousness, so that we're making we're consciously choosing our belief system. Because
Mm.
people are literally driven, are driven to use their freedom, their but they're not free because it's all coming out of their unconsciousness, and then consciousness has a lot of lies in it. And so when we let the unconsciousness push us through life and define our belief system, it's basically like taking a Bible that has been written by some crazy fanatic and thinking it's true, you know, and acting on that book and saying, I believe this, I'm going to do this. We're all walking around with a belief system that in some chapters is that messed up. And how do you know what chapters are messed up in your belief system that we're carrying in our unconscious belief system? You simply see what part of your life is not working. The part of your life is not working is because we're holding a belief system in our unconsciousness that simply will not allow that to work. And until a
Mm.
person gets in touch with that and starts making their belief system a conscious process, that they're going to have the bad fate.
Yeah. But would you rather say that one should look at his or her birth chart from an astrology point of view, and then um, see what is the part in his or her life that it's not working, and then work also together with a therapist, with a psychologist, to overcome those
Yeah, exactly. One of the
steps.
great things about astrology is that if we use the Logitanya Avastas, we can dig deeply into the person's psyche, and we can literally we literally can see at a glance what what belief system they're following, if it's a fulfilling or unpleasant result that they're going to get as a result of following that belief system. And then we
Mm,
can educate them about it. We can teach them what works. One of the beautiful things about astrology is, mechanically we know what works and what doesn't astrologically, which means what is a good or bad thing astrologically. So if a person is, you know, acting out of a belief system that's really going to sabotage their life, essentially, we already know what works in this situation. We can just say, this is how you need to play this game. Don't play it this way, play it this way. And if they're able to start playing it that way, now they're replacing that unconscious belief, which is, misguiding them with a conscious belief. And then they can get in the habit of that until it becomes normal. And at first it's going to be difficult, but eventually it becomes easy. It's a habit. And then their life will get better. Then that area of life can work out. So yes, with the horoscope, we can identify very readily where a person's stuck, where a person is playing a game that doesn't work. And it's all combined. When a person has a belief system that's simply not going to work on planet Earth, they also have a bad relationship with themselves.
yeah.
They're side by side. They're also going to possibly have a physical pathology as a result of that. Um, it impacts every part of our being in a way that's not helpful. But if we can get in touch with that, then all those parts will align themselves and be healed. So we can also see what actually needs to be healed in the person, and healing that will actually heal their physical bodies, because our physical bodies and its health is largely dependent on our emotional state, which is
Yeah.
depending on our consciousness.
Yeah, on our thoughts, and there were a lot of books were written on that topic.
Yeah.
I have another question. How does timing constrain the range of likely outcomes? Not predict them, but constrain them.
How does timing constrain the outcomes?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's how we can look at timing is that, you know, let's just take it to the belief system. We believe we're here to do this and have this. All right. I believe I'm supposed to have money. I believe I'm supposed to be a powerful executive. I believe I'm supposed to have a family and be married. So we proceed along these roads, but we have to wait for the opportunities to come, which is what the timing essentially does. So we
Mm,
can't just say, I want this, and then necessarily have it that day, right? We have to wait for the opportunities to come, take advantage diligently with the opportunities, work the opportunities, and grow those opportunities into greater and greater opportunities, right? And so, you know, timing essentially constrains the material realization of anything, okay? Because until there's an opportunity, there's no possibility. So a person can prepare themselves for something, but nothing will happen until there's opportunity, and the timing is going to bring that opportunity.
right.
Does that
So
answer?
luck is not something that comes upon us. Luck is something that is made
Yeah,
at the moment where we are able to recognize those opportunities that come
yeah,
related to the timing also.
yeah. Luck is something we make, and we make it in many many ways. Actually, it's like we could say every planet makes its luck in a different way. But yeah, every planet literally does make its luck in a different way. And if that planet is healthy in the Logitanya Avastas, we're going to be lucky with that planet because we're using that on the planet in the right way. So it looks like luck. It's not happening to that person, it's happening to you. You're lucky. No, I simply use this planet in a way that works. You don't.
Mm,
Therefore, you have no luck with this planet. It's really that simple.
yeah. In
And
your work.
it's actually a shame that we even have this word luck, because we should. The truth is, bad luck is like you just don't know how to make this work yet. Good luck is
Mm,
you're so good at making this work that you don't even know you're doing it.
yeah. And this leads me to another question. In your work, how do you distinguish between responsibility and capacity?
Okay. Um, yeah, those things are often at odds, right?
Yeah.
Responsibility is a materially given thing, essentially. Life gives us responsibilities as we go through it.
Hmm.
Um, Capability has to do with our emotional state. It's really has nothing to do with it has to do with our emotional state. And our
In which
emotional
way?
state has to do with our belief system, of course, our relationship with ourselves. So a person might be given the responsibility of a children, of having a child, but their emotional state might not have the capability to fulfill that. And we see things like this all the time, right?
Mm. Yeah.
So that's when someone doesn't have the capability to do something, then we have to go into the emotional realm. We have to heal the emotional realm. All right. So even if a person has the responsibility to have to do all this stuff, but maybe they're not very smart maybe they're just not very smart mentally. But if their emotional state is good, they'll do it anyway.
Hmm.
Because they believe if their emotional state and their relationship with themselves is good, they'll plod through it. If it takes them 20 hours, where it would take a smarter person 1 hour, they'll do it and they'll fulfill their responsibility. They won't get frustrated. They won't throw a fit. But you can get a very smart person whose emotions aren't as aligned, and even though they're very smart, they can get frustrated and throw things away and storm out and shirk their responsibilities. So our capability is largely based on our emotional well-being, our emotional state, we can say.
Yeah. Very true.
Feel that within ourselves, right? We're doing a great job, and then something happens that really disturbs our emotions, and then we just can't. I can't do this. Something you do every day of your life. You go to work and you do this, and one day you're like, I can't do this today because we're an emotional mess. Some people are that. That happens to all of us. We always have days that we cannot do what we normally do. But imagine people who are in that state every day. Those
Mm.
people exist, and those are the people that are irresponsible.
Yeah. Why why do leaders confuse competence with readiness? What's the difference between someone who can do the job
Mhm.
and someone whose timing is right for it?
Well, that gets into one of the fun parts of astrology because we like to think that leaders are responsible for our destiny here on earth. But the reality is, the people with the least power are the leaders because they have the collective destiny, electing them, putting them into power, pushing them into doing whatever intelligent or stupid things the collective destiny has merited and needs in order to make the global transformations that are happening. And it's a very long game. What I like to say, God plays the long con. So the short con is when you con someone and it's over in 2 minutes. Long con can take years, and then you walk
Mm,
away with someone's money, they don't even know it. So God plays this long game. And so we try to measure what's happening in the context of the moments to moments of our life, the years to years. But what's happening now is going to have ramifications, hundreds of years in the future. you know and so we really don't have the capability to understand the bigger picture fully, but the reality is the leaders are simply the spearheads of the collective destiny, and the health of the collective destiny is what's determining who gets elected. We live at a very interesting time right now where I just heard about another person come to power in another country who again is causing the country to be torn in half. We're seeing this all over. We're literally half the country wants this and half wants this. We see this in America with half people want to marry Trump, the other half want to murder Trump, right? And we're seeing this more and more in other countries of this fragmentation on of patriotic fragmentation. Why is this happening now? Not just one country, but it's happening more and more all over the time. where it's happening in England over certain incidences. Everyone's going left or right. Where's the middle ground that can hold the country together? It's getting lost more and more. We're seeing more extreme thoughts everywhere. So that's where the collective destiny is going now. And if we look closely at people's lives, we're going to see that individuals are more and more suffering this too.
Mm-hmm.
A division within the self, internal conflict, being torn in many ways. So we are simply in a period of being torn right now. And sometimes that has to happen. Sometimes for what needs to come out, you have to tear it open. And so literally people are being torn open, countries are being torn apart, and it's a very interesting time right now.
Yeah, it's a period of change. If you look at the planets, would you say that the way the planets are now aligned and the transits to have an influence of this?
Yes, for sure. But let me try to finish answering your question. So you asked between readiness and capability. Well, the reality is the leaders are not always supposed to be capable. That's the sad reality of it. The collective karma determines how intelligent and capable those leaders are going to be. Whatever the leader is, they're ready to make life work better or screw it up, depending on what direction the collective destiny is going to. There's no
Mm-hmm.
mistake for why anyone's in charge. And we can study this astrologically, and we can study the horoscopes of the country's leader, and that horoscope will show what's happening to that country. So, like, if I see that Mars is in a certain way, like, I met, Mars in Trump's chart, I said it many, many times. When you elect a president with Mars in this position, you always have war. So it's like you're just going to, because that planet is gonna indicate war. And so we can literally predict what's happening to a country based on the leader who's elected. His chart becomes the symbol of that. All these people are symbols of what that country is going through. So, so they're always capable. They're always ready to fulfill the capability of that nation. And sometimes that's really shitty. And at the end of the day, people need to take more responsibility and not expect that one person can change the collective destiny. It just doesn't happen that way. So, what was your next question? I'm sorry.
My question was, uh, it's related to the situation in which the world is now, or the situations the world is facing now. If you look at the planets and then the transits,
Yeah, it's
can
huge. It's huge. It's very, very important. What's happening right now is that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are all within the early degrees of a sign. What that means is they're all within aspect influence each other. Now, these are the three planets that create the big changes. So what's happening is, you know, Pluto destroys what needs to be destroyed. So imagine like this. I like looking at his art. Neptune is when the artist looks at the lump of clay and he sees what's in that lump of clay. He sees the potential of that clay. All right. Then Pluto comes and starts ripping chunks of the clay off and throwing it away, breaking things out. It's subtractive sculpting.
Mhm.
It cuts things off, and that hurts, right? And then Uranus is additive sculpting, like a 3D printer, right? So we have two ways to sculpt. We add to the sculpture and we subtract from the sculpture. And so when we have Pluto come along and hit something, it's going to destroy something because it's subtracting so that the sculpt can appear. And that's very painful. The clay's like, ouch, ouch, ouch. The person, the country's like, ouch, that hurts. I don't want this, But to bring the vision of the divine sculptor to realization, we have to do this subtractive sculpting. And then there's the additive sculpting. This is Uranus. This is like, I like this. This feels good. This is more of me. I'm shining here. And this is when the new developments happen, the good things come out and that move life forward. So these two processes are always happening. But right now, and of course, the Neptune process is seeing the vision. All right. So when all three of these are in similar degrees of a signs, what it means that any planet that gets impacted is going to get impacted by all three of these at the same time or in a very short time frame of each other. So
Mhm.
now that means a period of the greatest change possible. So whenever we see all three of these line up, we're in a period of the greatest change possible. The last time we saw this was around World War One, or no, last time was World War Two. Time before that was World War One. Those are obviously periods of huge global change. Now, in 1992, Uranus and Neptune were conjunct, and many astrologers were predicting World War III as a result. I said, no, no, it can't happen because we don't have Pluto, isn't within a degree range. I said, when all three are in degree range, then we can have the kind of changes that a world war would indicate. That doesn't mean it's a world war is required for those changes. It doesn't mean that. But because the world war is going to create so much global change, we need to have all three of these planets involved for it to happen. As it turned out, obviously no world war in 1992, 93, 94, when these planets were dancing together, because Pluto wasn't there. For a war, we need subtractive sculpting,
Mhm.
And so, right? And so now we're actually in a point where we have all three of these planets lining up. So we're in a period of huge global change. And does it have to be war? No. Will there be some war? Obviously, yes. Does it have to conflag? No. But from this, we know we're in a period of huge global change now. And once those planets get to a point where they're far enough from each other that they're not triggering everything simultaneously, then we'll see what those changes are. And it's a few year period. I haven't checked to see when they're going to be out, but so like each year I do like eclipse charts and I look and see what an eclipse is going to trigger. Well, right now, whatever is being aspected by Uranus in that eclipse chart is going to be aspected by Pluto and Neptune as well. So that plan is going to be changed dramatically, and lots of times
Yeah.
it's the eclipse itself that's being triggered. So that's huge changes. So we're in huge period of change. The August eclipse is huge this year. I'll be making some videos more specific about it later. Um, so yeah, we're in a period of huge change now, and how much of that will come from war? How much that will come from evolution? Well, we'll see.
Thank you. You didn't just interpret charts, you built software. What pushed you to formalize this system in code rather than keep it in interpretation?
Well, the thing is, the reality is there's so many aspects of astrology that have not been developed, not been researched, not even tried. The amount of knowledge in the old Hindu astrology books is absolutely insane. And so I essentially just needed a software so that I can try things and explore things and test things and these things were not in other software. So is either have a software or not figure it out because the amount of math handwork is too slow. And so yeah, so that was simply why I just needed the tools.
Mm. How
Yeah.
does Kala make timing visible in a way that human intuition constantly misses?
Well, okay. Human intuition is going to miss what it could see. The way intuition works is we're looking in just general direction, and then we see this over here more clearly. It's kind of like in our eyes. We have our color cones more in front, our black and white cones more on the side, right? The
Yeah.
black and white cones are more notice movement more. So when I'm looking here, I'm seeing this clearly, but any motion that comes here, I'm really going to notice, right? That's on my side. And that's what we do with timing methods and intuition. We look at the timing method clearly, directly with our focal forward vision. But our intuition sees all the peripheral motion of what's really going to happen. But the more we're looking in the right general direction, the more our intuition can see. So the different timing methods essentially just let us look in the right direction where we can see an event that's going to happen. So the timing methods, we could say, point our intuition in the right direction. And the more timing methods we have, the more directions we can look at. So instead of just looking west, I can look south, east, and north, and I can
Mm.
see. So with more timing methods, I'm able to see more of the picture rather than just some. So with more timing methods, maybe I'll predict 10 things that's going to happen that year. With one timing method, maybe I predict one thing that's going to happen that year.
Yeah.
So that's why it's good to develop more tools and to time. And sometimes a person's not sure. It's like, well, this could happen if I'm not sure. So another timing method confirms what they're thinking could happen if they can get a confirmation. So we like to use multiple timing systems to get confirmation to what our intuition is nagging us that will happen.
Great. Why did you choose the Vedic astrology uh, from all the systems and types?
You know, I did Western astrology, and I was very, very happy with it. It very much helped me in my own life. And then I opened up my Western astrology practice, and I had one client show up, and they started asking me all these questions that I simply wasn't prepared for. And these were essentially predictive questions. I had learned more about human behavior and psychology and all that stuff, which is typical of Western astrology. But my first client happened to be a person who wanted, real hard, concrete predictions. And I just wasn't equipped for that. So after that, I dove into Western predictive astrology, and I dove into progressions, got the best books and all that stuff. And I wasn't satisfied at all. I just wasn't satisfied with those techniques. I didn't find them lining up very crisply, meaning to make to any level of precision. Okay, yeah, this year, this 6 months, that's like very vague,
Mm.
at best 6 months with a lot of these techniques. And I think for me, I know there's astrologers who do well with those techniques, but I wasn't able to get them to work. And then all the psychological stuff that was in the chart, I would just see it at a glance. And there was so much tension going on in a person. Looking at the chart, I could see all and feel all the tension. That just seemed like an overwhelming mess to resolve. And I literally would get nauseous looking at a chart. And so I just couldn't look at, I literally could not read a chart. I get nauseous upon looking at the chart because everything that needed to be done in that chart seemed absolutely overwhelming because of the things that Western astrology is focusing on. Now, what I've learned since then, none of those things really matter. So anyway, so then I quit astrology. I went to an ashram. I didn't know what else to do. So I'm just going to go live in an ashram for 7, 8 months. I just had this feeling to do that. When I was there, um, literally on my birthday, I had a dream that I should study, that I should look at the Vedic astrology. So I ordered, one of the significant Sanskrit books with English translations, Brihat Parashara. And on my birthday, it came a few days later, and I just dove into it, and it just worked for me. Next thing you know, I'm predicting to people in the ashram within a weekend, within a 3 or 4 day window, what's going to happen to them.
Hmm.
And it was just working for me. And what I've learned since then is that there's really only a few things we need to really focus on and heal in a chart. With the Western, it was like, this is impossible. It's like, I felt like I was looking at a ball of yarn that was all tangled up. And inside that barn was this gem of a person, of a happy person. Yet in the lifetime, it was not going to be possible to untie all the knots in the tangle, right? So that's why I went to the ashram. I thought, I'm just going to go burn this ball of yarn. That's it, my own ball of yarn. Just light it up and burn it and be done with it in meditation. But what I ended up doing is discovering astrology, Vedic astrology, and that was working for me. And now I see it with the Lajitadya Vashtas. It's just a few concentrated cuts of the sword to resolve our problems. It's not a big tangled string. It's just a few correct, well applied chops of the samurai sword, and the gem is free. Now, those
Mm.
cuts have to be, a samurai practices cuts 1,000 times a day for every cut, so that's 10,000 cuts a day. And so it has to be done, it has to be done fully. And it takes time to learn how to make those cuts within ourselves. That's what life is about, preparing us to make these big internal shifts. But it's really not that much work to do. And that's the beautiful part. And anyone who wants to focus on their self-development can make these cuts. A lot of people don't. They don't want to work. They want to be comfortable. The most dangerous thing in the world is comfort. There's so many ways we can be comfortable in this world. You know, we can binge watch TV. We can go have great food. We can go out. We can party. We can drink. We can smoke dope. We can hang out with our friends and be useless. We can go to somebody who makes us feel better. So many ways we can be comforted, but comfort doesn't get the job done. And some people, you know, they can live without the comfort, which means they'll go to where it hurts and not avoid the pain. And if we simply decide not to avoid the pain, the reality is the hard things we have to do, it's only a handful of hard things. And those things will dramatically change our lives and our happiness. And astrology will show us what those things are.
Right. From a systems design perspective, is misaligned responsibility a design flow?
Is misaligned responsibility
A design flow?
a design flow? So is misaligned ability part of the design? For sure.
Mm.
Definitely is. You know, I like to say God doesn't waste anything, which means he doesn't waste our pathology either. Our pathology has a purpose. First of all, our pathology drives us. A person who doesn't have any pathology doesn't do anything interesting. They don't do anything useful. You know, that's what's interesting about pathology. Pathology causes people to create or destroy. And there would be nothing beautiful would be created if there wasn't pathology, yet nothing would be destroyed without pathology. And the question, of course, is what in the person determines how they use their pathology. They use it creatively, they use it in an ugly fashion. That's why we have people who had horrid lives, developed a lot of trauma, who become great people, help the world, heal the world, and other people, you know, molest children and become psychopaths and kill people, you know, and they both shared a similar trauma often. So, you know, but the beautiful thing about it is that our God doesn't waste anything. Our pathologies do something, do something useful. And sometimes that useful thing is to push and hurt other people and trigger them in discovering and healing their pathologies, you know.
Mm.
So some people are walking around and all they're going to do is literally, you know, hurt people, mislead people, whatever, show people what they through pain, essentially show people what they need to work on. That's necessary in life, because if we live in a perfect world where everyone treats us perfectly and everything works out for us, we're not going to grow. So the pathologies help us grow. Our pathologies help others grow, unfortunately, and no one wants to help people grow that way. But the reality is, we all do. We all help other people grow because of the pathologies we carry with us that push those people into a painful place. So it is part of the program. It is part of the motion of the planets. It is part of the events of our life. We have the opportunity to heal when we meet someone to love, and we have the opportunity to heal when somebody who we think loves us never wants to see us again. You know, they're both opportunities to heal if we take them that way.
Yeah.
And that's that's a decision. That's a choice of a person, depending on what they want to do with themselves, what they're here to do with themselves. They're here to grow and get to a place where happiness is something they own, not something they're given, but something they are. Or do they want to stay in a place of, you know, continue activation and trigger based on the circumstances and the ups and downs of life, you know, and the moods of other people and the whims of other people. Those are kind of our two choices in life.
Very true. And the 60 minutes that we had allocated for the session just
Okay.
flew. I have one more question for you before we close the session. For someone in the audience who is skeptical, who has dismissed astrology their entire life and career, what is the one thing you would want them to sit with after today?
Okay. Um, you know, I don't think it matters that much if we believe in astrology or not. But I think the most important thing I would tell anyone is that I'm going to say two things. I'm going to break it into two. Okay. One thing is the thing that's going wrong in your life is because of an unhealthy relationship with yourself. So instead of blaming it on that thing, if you start contemplating how you're treating yourself, how that thing makes you feel, how that thing frustrates you, and you look at how you're reacting to that thing, and you look deeply inside yourself, you'll see you're treating yourself the very same way that thing is treating you. So if someone is treating you like you don't matter, like you're unimportant, the boss doesn't treat you like you matter, or your girlfriend or boyfriend is treating you like you're not important, it's because you're treating yourself as not being important. You're not prioritizing yourself. So why should they? We get what we are. We get how we treat ourselves. So if we look for those connections of what you're experiencing with things that don't work and see how at the end of the day, you're responsible for that because you're treating yourself that way. Then the other thing I'd like to say, I think that, again, you don't have to believe in astrology, this is how it works, is that we're all desperate to do something. We're desperate to have something, power and wealth, or we're desperate to get love, or we're desperate to give love. Whatever this thing is that we're desperate for, we have to simply give that to ourselves. So we're desperate for a kind of love, give that love to ourselves. We're desperate to give love to a particular person, but they constantly reject it. All right, that's because we need to give that love to ourselves. The world is really showing us what we need to give to ourselves, what we need to do to improve the only relationship that matters. That's the relationship with ourselves, because how every other relationship goes, our job relationship, our work relationship, relationships with people, is dependent on that singular relationship. So, and with astrology, sure, we can see that. And a good astrologer can point you right in that right direction. But if you just understand those two principles and you introspect, you'll be able to solve all your problems.
Thank you very much, Ernst. I mean, this conversation has been exactly what I hoped it would be.
Okay.
And I'm genuinely thankful for you accepting the invitation and for you having this conversation with me. Um, for everyone watching, if something landed for you today, a question, a phrase, a moment of recognition, I'd love to hear it. So write us in the comment section. That's where the real conversation will continue. Ernst's work is at Kala Vedic Astrology. I will put the link in the comments for you to visit the website and maybe to continue the conversation with Ernst also after our session. I am Anne Kampf, and thank you for being here. Thank you one more time, Ernst, for your time and for you sharing your knowledge with us. And for the others, see you next time.
Okay, thank you.